The air in my sister Sarah's suburban home was thick with the scent of roasted turkey, spiced pumpkin pie, and the unspoken tension that always seemed to follow my brother, Mark. It was Thanksgiving, a day meant for gratitude and togetherness, but for our family it was a stage for our long-simmering resentment to perform. I stood by the fireplace, nursing a lukewarm beer, watching my two grandchildren, Liam, a curious 6-year-old, and Lily, a bubbly 4-year-old, play with building blocks on the rug. Their innocent laughter was a stark contrast to the storm brewing in the room. They knew me simply as Grandpa David, a man who loved to tell them stories and bring them surprise trinkets. They didn't know the man I was before, or the man I was now for that matter. They didn't know their grandpa had once been just a scrappy kid from a poor neighborhood, and they certainly didn't know the secrets I kept about my professional life. My kids, Jessica and Michael, were in on it, of course. They understood why I needed to keep my private and professional worlds separate, a lesson learned the hard way. Mark entered the living room, a swagger in his step and a forced smile on his face. He was dressed in a pristine polo shirt and expensive khakis, a caricature of the successful man he so desperately wanted everyone to see. He owned a small but moderately successful landscaping business, a fact he brought up at every opportunity. The truth was, his business was a franchise of a larger corporation, a corporation that was, unbeknownst to him, one of my many acquisitions. I had purposely kept that part of my life hidden from my family, especially from Mark. After years of his snide remarks and constant need to one-up me, the last thing I wanted was to fuel his resentment further. Well, if it isn't old David," Mark announced, his voice booming across the room. He didn't wait for a response, instead turning to my son Michael and his wife Emily. "Still letting the kids play with him? I wouldn't want them to pick up any bad habits." A hush fell over the room. My sister Sarah shot Mark a warning look, but he ignored her. My heart hammered in my chest. I felt a familiar heat rise in my face. It wasn't the heat of anger, but of shame. It was a leftover emotion from our childhood, from a time when Mark's words were the only measure of my worth. I met his gaze, my expression blank, a lifetime of practice at this game. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mark." He laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Right. What's so happy about it? Look at you. Same old faded jeans, same old worn-out smile. Still doing whatever it is you do for a living." The "whatever it is you do" was a long-running joke. For years, I'd intentionally downplayed my career. When I started my first company, a small tech startup, I told them I was a consultant. As the company grew into a multi-million-dollar enterprise, I upgraded to analyst. Now, as the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, I was still, to my family, just a special projects manager. It was easier this way. It kept Mark from feeling threatened and prevented the awkward questions about my wealth and how I spent it. The only people who knew the truth were my wife, who passed away 5 years ago, my kids, and my close friends, and my lawyer, of course. Mark glanced at my grandchildren, his voice dropping to a condescending whisper that was still loud enough for everyone to hear. "I mean, look at him, my own brother, still living like a college student. You'd think by now he'd have a decent car, a nice watch, but no, he's a walking testament to mediocrity, a failure. No wonder his wife, well, never mind." My son Michael stepped forward, his face a mask of controlled fury. "That's enough, Dad. Leave him alone." "What?" "It's the truth," Mark scoffed. He pointed a finger at me, his face contorted in a sneer. "He's trash. He always was, and he always will be. A man who can't even provide for his family properly. What kind of example is that for his own grandkids?" The words hit me like a physical blow. The shame was suffocating, but it was the look on my grandchildren's faces that broke my heart. Liam and Lily, their innocent eyes wide with confusion, looked from their great-uncle to their grandpa. They didn't understand what trash meant, but they understood the ugly tone. They understood the hurt radiating from me. I saw their small hands grip their building blocks a little tighter, their happy game forgotten. I felt the urge to respond, to defend myself, to reveal the truth and watch his jaw drop. But I bit my tongue. It wasn't about winning an argument. It was about protecting my grandchildren from this toxicity. I knelt down, feigning interest in their building blocks. "Hey guys, look at this. Can we build a spaceship?" My grandson, Liam, looked at me, his brow furrowed. "Grandpa, what did Uncle Mark mean?" "Nothing, buddy. I said, forcing a smile that felt like a painful mask. He was just talking nonsense. Let's build that spaceship, okay? I spent the next hour on the floor with my grandchildren, building a tower that leaned dangerously to one side, my mind replaying Mark's words. Trash. It wasn't just a casual insult, it was the summation of his entire life's perception of me. From the moment I was born, a sickly, bookish younger brother, I was a disappointment to him. He was the athletic, charming one, the one our father expected great things from. I was the afterthought, the one who stayed in his room reading, the one who worked odd jobs to save money instead of spending it on clothes or parties. After dinner, as the family gathered around the fireplace for coffee and pie, Mark launched into another story. It was about how he had just closed a massive deal, expanding his landscaping franchise to a neighboring city. He boasted about the new trucks he was ordering and the expensive vacation he and his wife were planning. The details were so specific, so over the top, they had to be fabricated. Yet everyone listened, offering polite congratulations. Everyone but me. I just sat in the corner, a ghost at the family table, my presence acknowledged only when it served as a target. My sister Sarah caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small apologetic shrug. She loved Mark, but she was exhausted by his constant need for validation. She knew the truth of my character, if not the full scope of my success. She knew that behind the quiet demeanor was a man who had worked tirelessly and had a heart of gold. But she also knew that nothing she said would ever change Mark's opinion of me. Later, as the evening wound down, Mark approached me with a condescending smirk. "You know, David, it's not too late to turn your life around. I could probably get you a job on one of my crews. It's honest work. Maybe you can learn to work with your hands for a change." His words, meant to be an insult, held a strange echo of our childhood. Our father, a factory worker, had always praised Mark for his practicality and common sense, while dismissing my dreams as fantasies. Now, years later, Mark was repeating the same tired lines. I looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not just a bully, but a deeply insecure man. His constant need to belittle me was a desperate attempt to elevate himself. He had spent his life trying to prove he was better, but all he had really done was stand still, a victim of his own stunted ambitions and inflated ego. I finally responded, my voice calm but firm. "I appreciate the offer, Mark, but I'm quite happy with my current line of work. It's challenging and it's fulfilling." He scoffed. "Please, fulfilling? What could be fulfilling about what you do? I bet you don't even make enough to afford this Thanksgiving meal if it wasn't for Sarah." My daughter, Jessica, overheard his comment from the kitchen and her eyes flashed with anger. I shook my head slightly, giving her a look that said, "Don't. I wouldn't let him get to me, not anymore, not in front of my kids and grandkids." As I was leaving, I hugged my grandchildren goodbye, holding them a little tighter than usual. I whispered to them, "You are special, you are smart, and you can be anything you want to be. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." I could feel Mark watching me from the doorway, a look of contempt on his face. He still thought he had won. He still thought I was the failure, the trash. He had no idea that tomorrow I would be sitting in a boardroom finalizing the acquisition of a company that owned the very franchise his landscaping business was a part of. He had no idea that in a few weeks he would be learning the identity of his new CEO, and that his world, built on a foundation of condescension and pride, was about to crumble. The thought wasn't a malicious one, but it was a quiet promise to myself. The game was about to change. The morning after Thanksgiving, the crisp November air felt clean, a stark contrast to the stale, heavy atmosphere of my sister's home. The shame from Mark's words still lingered, a dull ache in my chest. But as I sat in my spacious, silent apartment, overlooking the sprawling city skyline, the ache began to transform. It solidified into a hard, cold resolve. For years I had held back, believing that humility and distance would protect me from Mark's barbs. I was wrong. My silence had only fueled his fire. It was time for a change. My apartment, a penthouse unit I had purchased years ago, was a sanctuary. Its minimalist design, dominated by glass and steel, reflected a part of me that was disciplined and focused. My family knew I lived in a nice part of town, but they had no idea of the scale. I kept it that way on purpose, preferring to meet them in neutral spaces or at my sister's, a place that felt more like the home we grew up in. My wife, before she passed, had loved this place. She had filled it with warmth and life, with books and art and the lingering scent of her perfume. Now, it was just me and the echoes of a life I'd built from nothing. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was my assistant, Kevin. "Good morning, sir. Everything is set for the 10 a.m. meeting. Mr. Harrison and the board members are on their way." "Thank you, Kevin. I'll be ready," I replied, my voice steady. Today was the day. The acquisition of Allied Landscaping Group, a national corporation, was the culmination of months of negotiation. Allied was a big player in the industry, and its network of franchises was vast. A year ago, during one of Mark's bragging sessions, he'd mentioned his corporate partners, the very people he now worked for. A casual search revealed they were a subsidiary of a larger holding company, ripe for an acquisition. It wasn't my primary motivation for the deal. It was a sound business decision, but the poetic justice of it was undeniable. Mark's career was built on the foundation of a company I was about to own. I dressed in my usual uniform, a simple, well-tailored suit that fit my lean frame. It wasn't flashy and it didn't scream billionaire, but it was a statement of quiet authority. I didn't need to flaunt my success. My work spoke for itself. My car, a discreet black sedan, was waiting for me downstairs. It was an unspoken rule with my driver, Sam, that we never took the flashy cars when I was with family. My office was at the top of a skyscraper that bore the name of my company, but the family knew it as the building where I work. The view was breathtaking, a panorama of the city I had come to dominate, one strategic decision at a time. The conference room was ready, a long mahogany table, comfortable chairs, and a large screen displaying the final terms of the acquisition. Mr. Harrison, the CEO of Allied, entered the room, his face a mixture of relief and resignation. He was a good man, but his company had been mismanaged for years. I had given him a generous exit package and assured him his employees would be taken care of. He knew the deal was the best thing for his people. We got down to business. The meeting was swift and efficient. The lawyers went over the final details, and I signed the documents. The weight of the moment wasn't lost on me. I had just purchased a company that held the reins of my brother's livelihood. The irony was almost overwhelming. Mr. Harrison extended his hand. "Congratulations, Mr. Davis. I know the company is in good hands. I've always admired your work, your quiet efficiency." "Thank you, Harrison," I said, shaking his hand firmly. "We're ready to implement our transition plan. We'll be contacting all franchise owners within the next week to introduce ourselves and discuss the new corporate vision." "Understood. And what about the CEO of the main subsidiary, the one that oversees the franchises?" he asked. "He's a bit of an old guard, but he's been loyal." "I'll be handling that personally," I replied. "I want to make sure the transition is smooth. My goal is to work with the existing leadership, not replace them wholesale." He nodded, a look of relief on his face. "That's good to hear. The employees will appreciate that." After the meeting, I stood by the window, watching the city below. The feeling was a complex mix of triumph and melancholy. My success was the result of decades of hard work, sleepless nights, and the unwavering support of my late wife. She had believed in me when no one else did, when my own family called me a dreamer and a fool. She had been my rock, my anchor, and my greatest cheerleader. I wished she could be here to see this. She would have told me to be kind, to not let Mark's cruelty harden my heart. I knew she was right. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Michael and Jessica. "It's done. I'm the new owner of Allied Landscaping Group." Jessica's reply was immediate. "Wow, Dad. So Mark's boss is now you?" "Yes," I typed back. "But he doesn't know it yet. We'll be announcing the new leadership next week. I want to tell you both first." Michael's message came in a few minutes later. "Dad, this is incredible. You've earned this. But please be careful. Mark's ego is a fragile thing. He'll take this as a personal attack." Michael's words gave me pause. Was this a personal attack? On some level, yes, but it was also more than that. It was a culmination. It was the moment where the two worlds I had so carefully kept separate would collide. The quiet, humble David, the trash brother, was about to become the CEO of his brother's world. I knew it would be a painful moment for Mark, but I also hoped it would be a moment of clarity. He needed to understand that a man's worth wasn't measured by the car he drove or the clothes he wore. It was measured by his character, his resilience, and his ability to be a good man, regardless of his circumstances. I spent the rest of the day in a series of meetings, planning the transition. The logistics were immense, but I was in my element. This was what I lived for. The challenge, the strategy, the thrill of building something from the ground up. I felt the familiar hum of purpose, the same energy that had propelled me from a small shared apartment to this office at the top of the world. As I drove home that evening, the city lights twinkled like a million tiny stars, and I thought about the conversation I would have with Mark. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew he would be furious, humiliated, and filled with a bitterness that had been a part of him for decades, but I also knew that for the first time in a long time, I wouldn't be standing alone. I had my kids, my grandkids, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I had built this life for myself, brick by hard-earned brick. And in the end, that was all that truly mattered. The next few days were a blur of work, phone calls, video conferences, and late-night emails. The acquisition was officially announced to the public, and the news was met with praise from the business world. My phone, which I usually kept on silent, was ringing off the hook with calls from old friends and colleagues. They all offered their congratulations, but none of them mentioned the personal angle. They didn't know about Mark. A week after Thanksgiving, I got a call from Mark. My heart rate quickened. This was it, the moment of reckoning. I took a deep breath and answered. "David, it's Mark," he said, his voice clipped and formal. It was the first time he had ever used that tone with me. "Did you know about this? About Allied Landscaping being sold?" "I did, Mark. It's been in the works for a while." "And you didn't tell me?" His voice was rising with each word. "What kind of brother are you? So I could lose my franchise over this. This is my life." I listened to his tirade, his voice a mix of fear and anger. He was scared. For the first time, I heard genuine vulnerability in his voice, and it shifted something inside me. The desire for revenge, for that moment of triumph, began to fade. It was replaced with a sense of sadness. He had built his entire identity on being better than me, and now that foundation was shaking. "Mark, calm down. No one is losing their franchise." "That's not the plan," I said, my voice as soothing as I could make it. "I wanted to talk to you about this, but I wanted to make sure everything was in place first." "Talk to me about what?" he snapped. "What could you possibly know about this? You're just some guy who manages projects. What do you have to do with this?" I closed my eyes. This was the moment. I had to choose my words carefully. I didn't want to humiliate him. I wanted him to understand. I wanted to build a bridge, not a wall. But the truth had to come out. "Mark," I said, my voice dropping to a low, serious tone. "I am the CEO of Allied Landscaping Group, the new owner. I bought the company." There was a long, painful silence on the other end of the line. I could hear his ragged breathing. I could almost see his face, a mask of disbelief and shock. I waited. The silence stretched on, a chasm between us, filled with a lifetime of unspoken words and buried resentments. You're lying," he finally whispered, his voice a ghost of its former self. "You're making this up. It's not possible." "It's the truth, Mark. It's a matter of public record. You can check the news, the company website. We're holding a town hall for all franchise owners next Tuesday to introduce the new leadership and lay out our plans for the future. I want you to be there." I hung up the phone, my hand trembling slightly. The deed was done. The truth was out. The Thanksgiving storm had finally broken, and the real confrontation was just beginning. I had done what I had to do, not as an act of revenge, but as a final, painful act of honesty. The game was over. The truth was now in the open, and whatever happened next, we would face it together as brothers. I could only hope he would be able to see me not as a rival, but as family. The days leading up to the town hall were a blur of frantic energy. My team was working around the clock to finalize presentations and communication strategies. The message was simple. We were here to invest, not to dismantle. We were a partner, not an overlord. I wanted to reassure the franchise owners that their businesses, their livelihoods were safe. The goal was to build a better, stronger company together. Amidst the chaos, I received a series of text messages and calls from Mark. They were a mix of anger, disbelief, and a grudging curiosity. He sent links to news articles about the acquisition, each one more frantic than the last. "Is this you? Is this your company? I can't believe this." I didn't respond. I wanted him to process the news, to confront the reality of the situation on his own terms. I knew that anything I said would only be met with more accusations and denials. I had said my piece. Now it was his turn to process the truth. My sister Sarah called, her voice a mix of awe and concern. "David, Is it true? You bought Allied, why didn't you tell me? Mark is a wreck. He can't believe it's you. I explained my reasons. I've tried to keep my work life and family life separate for so long, Sarah. It was a promise I made to myself and to Mary. My career isn't something I want to define me, but Mark's comments at Thanksgiving, they were the last straw. I couldn't let him think he was right. She was silent for a moment. He's scared, David. He sees this as you taking everything he's worked for. He's been bragging about his business for years, and now he feels like a fool. I know, I said, and I'm not doing this to hurt him. I'm doing this to build something better. I hope he can see that. On the day of the town hall, the air was cold and a light rain was falling, a perfect metaphor for the chilly atmosphere I anticipated. I arrived early at the large conference center, the same one where I had signed the acquisition papers just a few weeks ago. The room was a sea of nervous faces. Franchise owners from all over the country had flown in, their faces etched with uncertainty. They didn't know who their new CEO was. They only knew that a new leader was taking over, and in the world of corporate acquisitions, that was rarely a good sign. I stood on the stage, the bright lights blinding me. My team was lined up behind me, a show of force and unity. Kevin, my assistant, gave me a reassuring nod. The room was buzzing with a low murmur, a collective anxiety. Then I saw him, Mark. He was sitting in the back row, huddled in a large coat, his face pale. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by a defeated slump. He had come alone, not with his wife as he usually did. His eyes, usually filled with a cruel glint, were now hollow and filled with a raw, unadulterated fear. He looked small, a ghost of the man who had called me trash just a few weeks ago. The sight of him so vulnerable twisted something in my gut. The triumph I had felt earlier was gone, replaced by a profound sadness. I walked to the podium and took a deep breath. "Good morning, everyone," I said, my voice amplified by the microphone. "Thank you for coming. My name is David Davis, and I am the new CEO of Allied Landscaping Group." A wave of gasps and murmurs swept through the room. I could see some of the franchise owners exchanging looks of surprise. My reputation in the business world was well known, even if my face wasn't. They knew my name. They just didn't know the face that went with it. I saw Mark flinch. He leaned forward in his chair, his eyes wide with shock. He wasn't just hearing my name. He was seeing me, his failed younger brother, standing at the head of a company that now owned his. I began my speech, a carefully crafted message of hope and collaboration. "I know many of you are concerned about this transition. I want to reassure you that I'm not here to tear down what you've built. I'm here to invest in it. We will be providing new technology, new marketing resources, and new support systems to help you grow your businesses. Your hard work and dedication are the backbone of this company, and I want to honor that." As I spoke, I scanned the room, making eye contact with as many people as I could. I spoke about my own journey, about starting from a small business and building it into something bigger. I talked about the importance of family and community, about how a strong company was like a strong family. It supported its members through thick and thin. I saw a few nods of agreement, a few smiles of relief. The tension in the room began to dissipate, but Mark remained motionless, a statue of shock and disbelief. He didn't clap when others did. He just stared at me, his mouth slightly ajar, as if he were watching a movie he couldn't comprehend. After the speech, I opened the floor for questions. The questions were a mix of practical business inquiries and concerns about the future. I answered each one honestly and transparently, building a sense of trust and rapport with the franchise owners. Finally, a man stood up from the back row. It was Mark. He was trembling, his voice a hoarse whisper. I have a question." A hushed silence fell over the room. Everyone's eyes turned to him. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it, the moment I had been dreading and preparing for. "Yes, sir," I said, my voice gentle. "Go ahead." He cleared his throat. You said your name was David Davis. Are you the same David Davis from our family?" The entire room turned to me, their eyes filled with sudden interest. This was a private moment, a public spectacle. The cameras were rolling, the audience was waiting. I chose my words carefully, looking directly at Mark. "Yes, Mark, I am." He let out a short, hollow laugh. "So you were at my sister's house just a few weeks ago, and you're my new boss?" The disbelief was palpable in his voice. It wasn't just a question, it was an accusation, a desperate plea for me to tell him this was all a mistake. Yes, Mark, I am. He shook his head, looking around the room as if for validation. But you're just a project manager, you're not a CEO, you're not... He trailed off, unable to say the word trash in front of this crowd. I didn't let him off the hook. I looked at the crowd, then back at him. I've been a special projects manager for a long time, Mark. It's just what I told my family. My work is what I've always been proud of, but I've always believed that family comes first. My goal has never been to impress you or anyone else with my career, but to be a good man for my family. The fact that my career has led me to this point is a testament to the hard work and dedication that I've always put into everything I do. The words hung in the air. The crowd was silent. It was a moment of profound vulnerability for both of us. Mark was exposed, his entire worldview shattered, and I was exposed, my carefully guarded secret out in the open. But for the first time I didn't feel shame. I felt a sense of relief, of liberation. Mark's face crumpled, his shoulders sagged, and he looked down at his feet. The swagger was completely gone. He looked like a little boy who had just been caught in a lie. "We have a lot to talk about, Mark," I said, my voice softening. "But not here. Not now. Let's talk later." He didn't respond. He just sat down, his head in his hands. I continued the meeting, my mind still on my brother. The town hall went on for another hour, and by the end I felt a sense of purpose and a glimmer of hope. I had laid out a clear vision for the company's future, and the franchise owners seemed to be on board. But the most important part of the meeting had nothing to do with business. It was about family. It was about a moment of truth, a raw, uncomfortable, and necessary conversation that had been a long time coming. The road ahead would not be easy, but at least now we were on it, together. The town hall ended, but the tension lingered in the air like a storm after the rain. Franchise owners swarmed the stage, eager to shake my hand and express their relief. They spoke of their excitement for the new vision, the new resources, and the new leadership. My team was ecstatic, their faces lit up with the success of the event. But all I could think about was Mark. I scanned the room, looking for him, but he was gone. He had slipped out quietly during the applause, a shadow disappearing into the crowd. My heart sank. I had hoped for a conversation, a chance to talk, to begin to heal the decades-old wounds. But he had run. My sister, Sarah, found me by the exit. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. She looked at me with a mixture of pride and sadness. "He's gone, David. He was so humiliated." "I know," I said, my voice a quiet sigh. I didn't want to humiliate him. I just wanted him to hear the truth. From me. "He's home. He called me. He's not doing well," she said, her voice full of worry. "He feels like his whole life has been a lie. He's been bragging for years about being better than you, about his success, and now he feels like a complete fraud." I nodded, the words twisting in my gut. I had known this was a possibility, but hearing it from Sarah made it real. "I'll go talk to him. I have to. It can't end like this." The drive to Mark's house was long and quiet. The city lights blurred into a long, shimmering ribbon of color. The rain had stopped, and the streets were slick with a cold sheen. I thought about our childhood, about the two of us, so different and yet so connected. Mark, the older brother, the protector, the one who was supposed to show me the ropes, and me, the younger brother, the one who looked up to him, who wanted to be just like him. Where had it all gone wrong? Was it the moment our father praised his strength and mocked my bookishness? Was it when I got a scholarship to college, and he didn't? Was it 1,000 tiny moments of perceived injustice and quiet resentment that had built up over the years? A slow-growing cancer that had finally metastasized at a Thanksgiving dinner. I pulled into his driveway. His house was a modest but well-kept suburban home, a testament to his years of hard work. The lights were on inside, a lonely yellow glow. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time I felt a familiar, boyish fear. I was about to face the dragon. I knocked on the door. After a moment, Mark's wife, Carol, answered. Her eyes were swollen, and she looked at me with a mixture of surprise and caution. "David," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to Mark, Carol. Is he here?" She hesitated, then sighed and opened the door wider. "He's in the den. He's not himself." I walked into the den. Mark was sitting in a worn leather chair, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. The room was dark, the only light coming from a small lamp in the corner. He didn't look up when I entered. He just stared into the empty space in front of him, his face a mask of defeat. "Mark," I said, my voice low. He flinched but didn't look at me. "Get out, David. I have nothing to say to you." "I know, but I have a lot to say to you, and you're going to listen." I sat down on the ottoman across from him, the distance between us a palpable chasm. He scoffed, a bitter sound. "So now you're going to give me a lecture? Tell me how you're the better man. Tell me you were right all along." "No," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not here to gloat. I'm here to apologize and to tell you the truth." He finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a raw, ugly emotion I had never seen before. "The truth? You've been lying to me my whole life. All those years you let me call you trash. You let me belittle you, and you just sat there, a silent fool. You could have stopped me at any time. You could have told me who you were, but you didn't. You let me make a fool of myself." The words hit me hard, a painful echo of my own insecurities. He was right. I had let him, but it hadn't been an act of malice. It had been an act of self-preservation, a defense mechanism born from decades of his bullying. "You're right, Mark. I should have told you. But I was afraid," I admitted, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I was afraid of how you would react. I was afraid you would resent me even more. I was afraid our relationship, as broken as it was, would shatter completely. I thought that if I kept my success a secret, we could at least pretend to be brothers." He laughed, a short, hollow sound. "Brothers? We haven't been brothers since we were kids. You've always been a competitor, and I've always been the loser." "That's not true, Mark," I said, my voice laced with emotion. "You were never a loser. You were just you. You were the golden boy. You were the one everyone praised. I was always in your shadow, and for a long time I let that define me. But then I realized I had to forge my own path, and that's what I did. I didn't do it to beat you, Mark. I did it to prove something to myself." He was silent for a long moment, staring into his glass. The whiskey sloshed back and forth, a miniature storm in a teacup. "Why me, David?" he finally whispered. "Out of all the companies in the world, why did you have to buy mine?" I shook my head. "It wasn't about you, Mark, not at first. It was a good business decision, but when I realized it was your company, I saw a chance to do something I should have done a long time ago. I saw a chance to be honest with you, to tell you the truth and to show you that a man's worth isn't measured by his job title or his bank account. It's measured by his character. And I wanted to show you that I'm not a failure, that I'm not trash." He looked at me, his eyes filled with tears, a mix of anger, shame, and a painful, long-hidden vulnerability. "You had to buy my company to do that." "I didn't have to," I said, "but it was a catalyst. It was a way to finally have this conversation. And I'm not here to take anything from you, Mark. I want to build you up. I want to give you the resources you need to succeed. I want to be your partner, not your boss." He didn't respond. He just sat there, a broken man in the dim light of his den. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't a silence of resentment. It was a silence of reflection, of a lifetime of pain and misunderstanding finally coming to a head. I had said everything I needed to say. Now, the rest was up to him. I stood up, walked to the door, and turned back to face him one last time. "I'll be at the office tomorrow, Mark," I said, my voice gentle. "If you need anything, call me. I'm not going anywhere. I'm your brother, and I'm here for you." I left him in the quiet darkness of his den, a solitary figure wrestling with a lifetime of lies and the overwhelming weight of the truth. The long, lonely walk back to my car was filled with a profound sense of closure. The battle was over. But the long, hard road of reconciliation was just beginning. The days following my visit to Mark were filled with an unnerving silence. He didn't call. He didn't text. It was as if our raw, uncomfortable conversation in his den had never happened. I found myself checking my phone constantly, a part of me hoping for a sign, any sign that he was processing things, that he was okay. But there was nothing. My sister, Sarah, confirmed he was still struggling, still withdrawn. He was a man adrift, his ego-driven compass now useless in a world he no longer recognized. The office, however, was a different story. The energy was electric. My team and I were in the thick of the post-acquisition transition. We were restructuring, analyzing data, and meeting with key personnel. The news of the town hall had spread, and the initial fear of the unknown had been replaced by a cautious optimism. Franchise owners were calling, expressing their support and enthusiasm for the changes we were proposing. They saw the potential for growth, the opportunity to finally get the resources they needed to compete in a tough market. One morning, my assistant, Kevin, buzzed me. "Sir, a gentleman named Mark Davis is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." My heart leaped. He had come. I took a deep breath, a mix of relief and anxiety washing over me. "Send him in, Kevin." Mark walked into my office, and for a moment I didn't recognize him. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by a simple polo shirt and worn work pants. His usual swagger was replaced by a hesitant, almost apologetic shuffle. His face was pale, his eyes still held a lingering shadow of defeat, but there was also something new in them, a flicker of something that looked like humility. He stood awkwardly in the center of the room, looking at the city skyline outside my window. He didn't say a word. I gestured to a chair. "Have a seat, Mark." He sat down, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I'm not here to cause a scene, David. I just needed to see you, in this place." "I understand," I said, my voice gentle. "How are you doing?" He let out a short, mirthless laugh. "How do you think I'm doing? My whole life has been turned upside down. I thought I was on top of the world. I thought I had it all figured out. And you were just there, quietly watching me make a fool of myself. Mark, I wasn't watching you. I was living my own life, and I was trying to protect what little we had left of a relationship," I said, my voice tinged with a raw honesty. He looked at me, a flicker of emotion in his eyes. I don't understand. How? How did you do all this? You were always so quiet, so unassuming." I smiled sadly. "That's just it, Mark. I didn't do it to impress anyone. I did it because I loved to build things. I started with a small idea, a few lines of code, and I just kept building, one brick at a time. The money, the success, it was a byproduct. It was never the goal." He was silent for a moment, absorbing my words. The silence in the room wasn't awkward or tense. It was a silence of understanding, of a lifetime of misconceptions finally being dismantled. "So, you're really the CEO?" he finally asked, the question hanging in the air, a final necessary confirmation. "Yes, Mark, I am." He nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "So, what happens now? To me? To my business?" I leaned forward, my tone shifting to a more professional, yet still compassionate one. "Your business is a good one, Mark. You've built a loyal customer base and a solid reputation in your community. But the franchise model has been stagnant. We have a plan to change that. We're going to invest in new technology, better equipment, and a robust marketing strategy. We're going to build this company into something bigger and better, and I want you to be a part of it." He looked at me, his eyes wide with surprise. "A part of it? You're not going to fire me?" "No, Mark, I'm not. I want you to stay. I need people like you, people who know the business from the ground up. I want you to be a part of my advisory team. I want your feedback, your insight. You've been in the trenches for years. That experience is invaluable." He was speechless. He stared at me, his jaw slightly ajar, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had come here expecting a firing, a lecture, a final humiliation. Instead, he was being offered a seat at the table. "Why, David?" he finally whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "After everything I've said and done to you, why would you do this?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. "Because we're brothers, Mark. We've been through a lot of good times and a lot of bad. We've said things we shouldn't have said. We've carried grudges for far too long. But at the end of the day, we're family, and family looks out for each other. I'm not doing this because you deserve it. I'm doing it because I want to fix what's broken between us. I want our kids and our grandkids to see us as brothers, not as rivals." He stood up and walked to the window, standing beside me. We stood there for a long moment, two men who had spent a lifetime in competition, now standing side by side, looking out at the world we were both a part of. The silence was different this time. It wasn't a silence of resentment or anger. It was a silence of understanding, of a new beginning. "I don't know what to say, David," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything I said at Thanksgiving. I was wrong. I was so wrong." I put a hand on his shoulder. "I know, Mark, and I forgive you. Now let's get to work. We have a company to build. He nodded, a new light in his eyes, a light of purpose, of hope. He wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was just Mark, a man who had been humbled by life and was now ready to start over. And I was just David, the brother he had once called trash, now standing by his side, ready to help him build a better future. The storm was over, and the sun was finally breaking through the clouds. The news of Mark's appointment to the corporate advisory team spread quickly through the family. My children, Jessica and Michael, were relieved. They had worried about the fallout of the town hall, fearing it would tear the family apart for good. My sister Sarah was overjoyed. She called me, her voice full of emotion. "You did it, David. You saved him. You saved our family." I didn't see it as saving him. I saw it as a beginning, a new chapter for us, but I knew what she meant. For so long our family gatherings had been strained, a performance of forced pleasantries and thinly veiled insults. Now, for the first time in years, there was a sense of hope, a feeling that we could finally be a family again. Mark was a changed man. He came to the office every day, not with a sense of entitlement, but with a quiet humility. He was a sponge, soaking up every bit of information he could. He attended meetings, took notes, and asked thoughtful questions. He was no longer the boastful, arrogant brother. He was a partner, a collaborator. He was a man who had been humbled and was now willing to learn. One afternoon, he came into my office, a stack of papers in his hand. He looked a little nervous, a rare sight for a man who had always exuded confidence. "David, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course, Mark. Come in. Sit down." He sat down, and for a moment he just looked at me. "I was thinking about Thanksgiving, about what you said to the kids, about how they can be anything they want to be, and about what you said to me." He cleared his throat. "I want to apologize to them. I want to tell them I was wrong." My heart swelled. This was a step I had never expected him to take. It was a step of true humility, a step towards genuine reconciliation. "That's a very kind thing to do, Mark," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I know it means a lot to them." "It means a lot to me," he said, his voice a quiet whisper. "I don't want them to grow up thinking that's what a man is supposed to be. I want them to see a real man, someone who admits when he's wrong." He was right. Our kids and our grandkids had been watching us for years. They had seen the rivalry, the competition, the thinly veiled contempt. They had seen a family that was broken. Now they would see a family that was trying to heal. A few days later, my son Michael called. "Dad, we're having a family dinner at our place this weekend. Jessica and her family are coming, and so are Sarah and Mark. He wants to talk to everyone." I felt a pang of nervousness. The last family dinner had been a disaster, but this time it was different. This time it was by choice. The day of the dinner, I arrived at Michael's house, a small, cozy home filled with the smell of roasting chicken and the sound of children's laughter. The atmosphere was a world away from the strained, tense Thanksgiving. Everyone was relaxed, smiling, and genuinely happy. I hugged my grandchildren, and they hugged me back, a little tighter this time. They didn't see me as Grandpa David anymore. They saw me as the man who had stood up for himself, the man who had shown their great-uncle that a man's worth wasn't measured by money or status. They saw a role model. The conversation at the dinner table was light, easy, and natural. Mark and I talked about the company, about the new plans, about the challenges and the opportunities. He spoke with a quiet passion, a genuine enthusiasm that I had never seen in him before. He was talking about the business, not to brag, but to share. After dinner, as the kids were playing in the living room, Mark cleared his throat. Everyone's eyes turned to him. He looked a little nervous, but he stood tall. "I want to say something," he said, his voice a little shaky at first, but growing stronger with each word. "A few weeks ago at Thanksgiving, I said some things that were hurtful and wrong. I was jealous. I was insecure. I had built my life on a foundation of pride, and I didn't know how to handle the fact that my brother, who I saw as less than, had achieved so much more than I ever had, and in my pride, I called him trash. I told my family he was a failure, and I was wrong." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a raw, painful honesty. "David, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything I've said and done. I'm sorry for all the years of resentment. You were never trash. You were always the best of us, the kindest, the smartest, the most hard-working, and you deserved all the success you've achieved." He looked at my kids, Jessica and Michael. "I'm sorry for the way I spoke about your father. He's a good man, and I'm proud to call him my brother." He looked at his own wife, Carol, and she reached out and took his hand, her eyes filled with tears of relief. He looked at my grandchildren, Liam and Lily, who were now watching with wide, innocent eyes. "And to you, my dear little ones, I want to say this. Never let anyone tell you who you are supposed to be. Always be true to yourselves, and never ever let pride get in the way of love." The room was silent. A few tears were shed, and then my grandson, Liam, walked over to Mark and gave him a big hug. "It's okay, Uncle Mark," he said, his small voice full of warmth. "We all make mistakes." Mark held him tight, a look of profound relief and gratitude on his face. It was a moment of grace, a moment of true forgiveness. The past was not forgotten, but it no longer held a claim on us. We were finally free. I walked over to Mark and put my hand on his shoulder. He looked at me, and in his eyes, I didn't see a rival anymore. I saw a brother, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt a deep sense of peace. The storm was over, and the family was finally home. The weeks that followed were a testament to the power of reconciliation. The company was thriving under our new leadership, and Mark was excelling in his new role on the advisory team. He was no longer just a franchise owner. He was a partner, a collaborator. He brought a wealth of practical experience to the table, and his insights were invaluable. Our board meetings, once a formal affair, were now a collaboration, with Mark's perspective often shedding light on issues we hadn't considered. Our relationship, too, was transforming. We began to spend time together outside of work. We went for coffee, played a round of golf, and even went to a baseball game, something we hadn't done since we were teenagers. We talked not just about business, but about life. We spoke of our childhood, of our parents, of our wives. We laughed about old stories, and we shared new ones. The years of silence and resentment were slowly being replaced by a genuine, heartfelt connection. One afternoon, Mark came into my office, looking thoughtful. "You know, David, I was thinking about our dad. He always wanted me to be successful. He always wanted me to be the big shot. He would have been so proud of me now, with my new role and all." I looked at him, and a wave of sadness washed over me. Our father, a hard-working man who had never been able to express his love, had been a huge part of our rivalry. He had pitted us against each other, a silent competition that had defined our relationship for decades. "He would have been proud of both of us, Mark," I said, my voice gentle. "He always wanted the best for us. He just didn't know how to show it." "He thought you were a dreamer, a fool," Mark said, his voice laced with regret. "He thought you wouldn't amount to anything, and I believed him." "I'm sorry, David. I'm so sorry for not believing in you." "It's okay, Mark," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I knew who I was, and so did Mary. She was the one who always told me to follow my dreams, to not let anyone define me. She was my rock, and she would have loved to see us like this." He nodded, a single tear rolling down his cheek. He had never truly grieved his wife, had never let himself be vulnerable enough to do so. Now, in this quiet moment, he was finally allowing himself to feel. "She always talked about you, you know," I said, my voice a quiet whisper. "She always said you had a good heart, that you just needed to get out of your own way." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a raw, honest emotion. "She was right, David. She was always right." The conversation was a turning point. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about family, about forgiveness, and about healing old wounds. We were finally talking about the things that truly mattered. A few weeks later, Mark called me on a Saturday morning. "Hey, David, I was thinking, do you want to come over? My family and I are grilling some burgers. The kids are going to be there, and so is Sarah. It's just a casual get-together, no big deal." I smiled. This was it. Not a formal family dinner, not a forced Thanksgiving feast, but a simple, casual get-together. It was a sign that we were finally moving past the performative stage of our reconciliation and into a genuine, heartfelt connection. I drove to his house, the same one I had visited just a few weeks ago, but this time the house felt different. It was no longer a place of darkness and despair, but a place of light and laughter. The grill was sizzling, the kids were playing in the backyard, and the air was filled with the smell of charcoal and the sound of music. Mark met me at the door, a genuine smile on his face. "Hey, little brother," he said, and he gave me a hug. A real hug. Not a formal, awkward embrace, but a real, heartfelt hug. My grandchildren, Liam and Lily, ran up to me, their faces lit up with joy. "Grandpa David," they said, and they hugged me tight. The day was perfect. We talked, we laughed, we ate, and we just enjoyed each other's company. We were a family, not just by blood, but by choice. We had chosen to forgive, to heal, and to move forward. As I was leaving, Mark walked me to my car. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Thank you, David," he said, his voice filled with a profound gratitude. "For everything, for not giving up on me." "I never would, Mark," I said. "You're my brother." He nodded, and for a moment we just stood there, two brothers who had once been rivals, now standing side by side, united by a lifetime of shared history and a newfound sense of understanding. The road to reconciliation had been long and painful, but it was worth it. We had lost so much time, but we had a lifetime of new memories to make, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly home. The reconciliation with Mark was not a one-time event, it was a continuous process. We had our good days and our bad days. There were moments when old habits would rear their ugly heads, a snide comment, a defensive posture. But we learned to navigate them, to talk through them, to apologize and to forgive. Our relationship was a work in progress, a testament to the idea that true change takes time and effort. Mark, in his new role, was a revelation. He was a natural leader, and his insights were proving invaluable. He was not just a great landscaper, he was a brilliant strategist. He had a deep understanding of the customer base, and he was able to see opportunities and challenges that my corporate team had missed. He was now a respected voice in the boardroom, and he was no longer a man who needed to prove himself. He was a man who knew his worth. But with great power comes great responsibility, and Mark was feeling the weight of the expectations. He was no longer just the owner of a small franchise, he was a leader in a national corporation. He was now held to a higher standard, and he was feeling the pressure. One day, I found him in his office, his head in his hands. He looked exhausted, the lines on his face etched with stress. "Everything okay, Mark?" I asked, my voice filled with concern. He looked up, a weary smile on his face. "Yeah, I'm just tired, David. I'm used to just working hard, getting my hands dirty. Now I'm in meetings all day. I'm making decisions that affect thousands of people. It's a lot of pressure." I sat down on the edge of his desk. "I know. It's not easy. But you're doing a great job, Mark. You're a natural at this. You have a unique perspective that no one else has. You have to trust yourself." "I don't know," he said, his voice a quiet whisper. "I feel like a fraud sometimes. I feel like I'm going to be exposed, like I'm going to make a mistake, and everyone is going to realize I'm not who they think I am. I feel like I'm still that boy who everyone expects to fail." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. He was talking about me. He was talking about his own insecurities, but he was talking about my experience, the weight of expectations, the fear of failure, the feeling of being an imposter. These were all things I had dealt with for years. "I know that feeling, Mark," I said, my voice filled with empathy. "I've felt it my whole life, the feeling that you're just not good enough, that you're going to be found out. But you're not an imposter, Mark. You're the real deal. You've earned this. Every decision you've made has been a good one. You've brought a new perspective, a new energy to this company. You're not just a part of the advisory team. You're a leader, and I'm proud of you." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a raw, painful honesty. He had never been able to accept praise, always deflecting it with a joke or a snide remark. But this time, he just nodded, his eyes glistening with tears. "Thank you, David," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That means a lot, more than you know." We sat in silence for a few minutes. Two brothers, a CEO and his advisor, but also two men who had spent a lifetime fighting each other, now sitting in silent understanding. We had both come a long way. We had both been broken and had found a way to heal. The next day, Mark was back to his old self, but with a new sense of purpose. He was still a hard worker, but he was also more confident, more secure in his own skin. He had faced his fears, and he had come out stronger on the other side. Our reconciliation had a ripple effect. It was an inspiration to our family, to our friends, and to our colleagues. It was a story of hope, a story of forgiveness, and a story of second chances. We had learned that family wasn't just about blood, it was about the choices we make. We had chosen to forgive, to heal, and to move forward. And in doing so, we had not only saved our family, we had also saved ourselves. 2 years passed. 2 years of hard work, of growth, of challenges, and of triumphs. The company, now a leader in the industry, was a testament to our collaboration. Mark's insights had proven to be invaluable, and he was now a key member of the executive team, a respected voice in the industry. He was no longer just my brother, he was my partner. Our relationship too had blossomed. We were closer than we had ever been. We talked every day, sometimes for hours. We shared our worries, our hopes, and our dreams. We were no longer two men in a silent competition, but two brothers, two friends, two men who had found a way to heal a lifetime of wounds. Our families had grown closer as well. Our kids were now close friends, and our grandchildren were inseparable. We spent holidays together, vacations together, and we celebrated each other's successes. We were no longer a family divided, but a family united. One evening, Mark and I were sitting on my back porch drinking a glass of whiskey, watching the sunset. It was a cool evening, and the air was filled with the smell of freshly cut grass and the sound of crickets. "You know, David," Mark said, his voice filled with a quiet contentment, "I never thought we would get here. I never thought we would be like this. I always thought we were destined to be enemies." "I know," I said, a smile on my face. "I've thought the same thing, but we proved ourselves wrong. We proved that love is stronger than hate, that family is more important than pride." "You were right, you know," he said, his voice a whisper, "about everything. About how a man's worth isn't measured by his bank account, about how family is the most important thing. You were right all along, and I'm so grateful that you never gave up on me." I looked at him, and I saw not just my brother, but the man he had become, the humble, kind, and loving man who had once been so lost. He had found his way home, and he had found himself. "I never would, Mark," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You're my brother, and I love you." He smiled, and for the first time in a long, long time I saw no shame in his eyes, just love. "I love you too, David," he said. We sat in silence, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in a blaze of orange and purple. The moment was perfect. It was a moment of peace, of contentment, of a lifetime of pain finally coming to an end. We had built a legacy, not just of a successful company, but of a family that had been broken and had found a way to heal. A few weeks later, Mark called me with some exciting news. He and his wife Carol were expecting a baby. It was a surprise, a miracle. He was over the moon, his voice filled with a joy I had never heard before. "I'm going to be a father again, David," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And this time I'm going to do it right. I'm going to be a man my kids can be proud of. I'm going to teach them what I learned from you. That true strength isn't about power, it's about humility. That true wealth isn't about money, it's about love." I was so proud of him. He had found his purpose, his mission. He was going to be a great father, a great husband, and a great man. He was no longer the boy who was defined by his father's expectations or his brother's success. He was a man who had found his own way, his own path. The night he called me, I sat in my quiet apartment, looking out at the city lights. I thought about my own wife, Mary, and how much she would have loved to see this. She had always believed in Mark, even when he couldn't believe in himself. She had always believed that our family could be whole again. She was right. She was always right. I pulled out a small photo album from my drawer, a collection of old photographs of me and Mary. I looked at her smiling face, and I felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had been the one who had given me the strength to be the man I was today. She had taught me that true love wasn't about holding on, it was about letting go. She had taught me that true success wasn't about what you have, it was about who you are. I closed the album and put it back in the drawer. The past was a part of me, a part of us, but it was no longer a weight around our necks. It was a memory, a lesson, a foundation on which we could build a better future. I had my family, my brother, my company, and my memories. I was a rich man, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt truly whole. It was Thanksgiving again. 2 years had passed since the last one, the one that had changed everything. The air in Sarah's suburban home was still thick with the scent of roasted turkey and spiced pumpkin pie, but the tension was gone. It had been replaced by a warmth, a joy, a genuine sense of family. I sat by the fireplace, a glass of water in my hand, watching my grandchildren, Liam and Lily, play with their cousin, a new addition to the family, a little boy with Mark's eyes and a smile that lit up the room. Mark's son. He was a curious, happy little boy, and he was a testament to the power of second chances. Mark was in the kitchen, helping Sarah with the turkey. He was no longer the arrogant, boastful brother I had known for so long. He was a partner, a friend, a man who had found his purpose. He was a man who had been humbled by life and had come out stronger on the other side. He walked into the living room, a genuine smile on his face. He sat down on the rug with the kids, a small hand on his leg, and he started building a tower with them. It was a simple, small gesture, but it meant the world to me. It was a sign that we had finally come full circle. The man who had once called me trash was now a loving father, a devoted husband and a true partner. My son Michael sat down next to me, a proud smile on his face. "You did it, Dad," he said, his voice a quiet whisper. "You brought us all back together. You saved us." "I didn't save anyone, Michael," I said, a gentle smile on my face. "We saved ourselves. We chose to forgive. We chose to heal. We chose to be a family." Mark looked up from the rug, his eyes meeting mine. There was no shame in his eyes, no anger, no resentment, just love, a love that had been buried for decades, now finally free. Later, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Mark stood up. The room fell silent. He looked around at everyone, a profound sense of gratitude in his eyes. "I want to say something," he said, his voice a quiet whisper, but a whisper that held the weight of a lifetime of lessons. 2 years ago, I stood in this very room, and I made a fool of myself. I said some things that were hurtful and wrong. I was a man lost in a world of pride and insecurity. I thought I had it all figured out, but I had lost the most important thing of all, my family. He looked at me, a profound sense of love in his eyes. My brother, David, could have easily turned his back on me. He could have taken everything I had worked for, but he didn't. He chose to build me up. He chose to give me a second chance. He taught me that a man's worth isn't measured by his bank account, but by his heart. And he taught me that true wealth isn't about what you have, but about who you are. David, you are a great man, and I am so proud to call you my brother. He raised his glass. To family, to love, and to second chances. We all raised our glasses, and the room was filled with the sound of laughter and the warmth of love. It was a perfect moment, a moment of a lifetime of healing, of a family finally reunited. We had learned that family wasn't just about blood, it was about the choices we make. We had chosen to forgive, to heal, and to move forward. And in doing so, we had found something more valuable than any amount of money. We had found a home in each other, and for the first time in a long, long time I knew I was truly home. The long journey was over, and a new, beautiful story had just begun.